Hey everybody, Chris here, and we're back with the 3-hour tour. It's a grand tour of the Kerbal system in Kerbal Space Program. It's been a while since I put up a video, and since then, 0.19 has dropped. And as you can see here, any of the eagle-eyed among you can see that I've replaced the wheels on our rover. Made a couple of other changes, but the biggest change is that I've replaced the rover wheels on our Gilligan rover here on the left side of the screen with the Mark I wheels from that they added in the latest patch. So we're ready to go, except we do not have a lot of fuel in this ship. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to launch up some more. I have a ship that I've used in the past, and it's my Mark IV tanker. We're going to go ahead and launch that up, rendezvous with the minnow, and get it going. It's a pretty big tanker, as tankers go. It delivers, 9 full jumbo tanks to orbit, and usually enough RCS. I won't be showing it today, but it can do a full return back to the KSC, and yeah, we'll launch it off here. Like I said, I mean it's any of these rockets, when you're shooting up a rocket in real life or in the game, in order to shoot up big payloads, big heavy payloads, they talk about the mass fraction for rockets, and it's high. The amount of your, or sorry, I mean the mass fraction is really low. The amount of your original ship that makes it into orbit is usually pretty small. In this case, I think we start out at something like some ridiculous amount, like 1,500 tons or something like that, just in order to get these 9 tanks that are 34 tons apiece into orbit. It actually might be more like 2,000 kilotons. I'd have to look it up, but it is a pretty big ship, but that's cost of doing business when you're working in space. So yeah. It's really not very complicated. We have a pretty normal asparagus staged ship. This is pretty normal for a Kerbal Space Program, but any of you might not watch Kerbal Space Program may think that it's a crazy thing. But in Kerbal Space Program, we do have a lot of liberties that normal space programs don't have. We can spend a lot of time and a lot of launches making sure something works, and it doesn't have to have, I can't remember the manned rating. In order to get a manned rating, I think you have to be able to show that you should statistically have like less than 1 in 1,000 chance of crashing, or having something go wrong. And so a ship like this would be totally would be crazy, because all this staging, all this jettisoning of tanks and engines. Not only is it economically not really smart to have all these engines and jettison them so close together, and there's no recovery mechanism, there's no parachutes for these things, and it's just not very feasible to do. But because we have Kerbal Space Program and we have an unrealistic drag model and all that, we get to do really cool stuff. Asparagus staging is where it's like a stalk of an asparagus. They go 2 at a time all the way around, and then they keep going around and around in concentric circles usually. And till we're done, we still have quite a bit of rocket. I probably should have sped this up a little bit more. But yeah, I also switched over. The new version of MechJeb dropped while we were not on air, and it's pretty nice. We have all of these panels, these kind of darker panels on the left and right, are an add-on for Kerbal Space Program called MechJeb. Really pretty useful tool. The orbital, ascent guidance system on the left here is what's putting us into orbit right now. This is not man controlled, and it's fine. You can do it with or without. Usually, it's not too hard to get these things into orbit. The main reason I like to use it is because for precision. It's ever repeatable. You know exactly how it's going to behave, and you can kind of expect that the thing will work the same as it did the time before, which is really nice for when you're doing orbital, rendezvous. So we're just about finished with our, we've just finally, we have we're above, we have a real orbit. The atmosphere on Kerbal Space Program is at about, I think the lowest stable orbit is just shy of 70,000 meters. And we're coming, yep, so we're basically having an orbit now. And as soon as we get that, we'll start coasting towards our apoapse, and we'll jettison the launch stage. I like to make sure I have a clean orbital path, and so I like to deorbit these things. Plenty of extra fuel for putting that sucker back down on Kerbal. It'll burn up in re-entry, in some other game where it just doesn't crash. Oh, that's another thing we have. We have a really nice warp helper in the new MechJeb, which is pretty helpful. We'll go ahead and move our intercept. For any of you who might have missed on other missions, other videos so far, is docking is it's a pretty cool process in Kerbal Space Program. They have a lot of really helpful targets on the nav ball for docking, for rendezvousing, and docking, I guess. I do like this smart ASS feature for MechJeb. It helps you orient your ship because, honestly, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to repositioning. So you can just say, hey, I would like you to point me at this, this little green guy on the nav ball in the bottom middle. There's 2 green and 2 purples, and blue sometimes, and they're really, really helpful. They show when you don't have a target, they show your prograde and retrograde vectors, so your direction of travel along your orbit, or the the opposite of that, the reverse the direction of travel. When you are in targeted mode, you also get these other ones that show the same symbol, those green markers, and they show the direction of travel relative to your target, which in this case is the minnow. So basically you burn towards the ship, and because of the way orbital mechanics work, you will kind of slide past it, and as you get closer, you don't always go directly towards it the whole time. And then once you get your closest approach, you will go and point at the retrograde relative motion marker and bring your speed, your speed down to as low as possible. And then you just keep repeating that, and that will bring you ever closer to your target. All right, so on this one, I actually decided I was going to try the autopilot. I haven't used the new MechJeb very much, so I've done docking plenty of times. So I wanted to try this new autopilot, and it seemed to work pretty well. It got us lined up. It kind of got us kind of cozied into position. Started bringing us in really slow. And normally with these kinds of systems, you end up using a lot of RCS all the time. All these little white streaks are a reaction control system. It's using monopropellant, and it's pretty cool. We talk about the Dragon capsule uses an RCS Draco thruster in order to actually put itself into its final orbit and orient itself. So as I'm using this, suddenly the RCS stops, which I thought maybe I'm just on target and I don't need any more RCS. And the system, was smart enough to save me a couple liters of RCS. And as I get closer and closer, still no RCS. I'm like, I'm not alarmed. But as we get up right to the point where you'd be docking, I start to drift away. Some among you may have noticed that in my launch sequence, I actually ended up turning off all my RCS tanks except for 2, so that I wouldn't drain them during the ascent. And this is me watching it for like 5 minutes while I'm waiting for MechJeb to pick up and fix it. And so it just goes to show that when you're getting used to a new system, you can make stupid mistakes like waiting here for 5 minutes for MechJeb. So as soon as I realize what has happened and I need to enable Not that it was MechJeb's fault. I mean, I disabled the tanks. As soon as I realized that I've disabled all my RCS tanks, and I probably should undo that, then MechJeb takes over and is like, okay, cool, we can dock you again. So this is actually all at like I think like 24x speed. So it was a long time that I was sitting there watching this silly thing. So I'm burning fuel because I'm impatient. All right. So now that we're docked, we're going to use the I think it's VFM fuel panel here. Really excellent tool for moving fuel around between multi-part ships. And we'll go ahead and drink up the tanker's milkshake, and then we will be ready for to go for broke. Actually, I had another part of the video that I apparently didn't get to catch. You'll see in a minute. The coconut lander is the one here in the middle of the frame. I went ahead and turned it around because we have a lot of delta V. It's almost 800, a little over actually 800 delta V in order to make the transfer from Kerbal orbit all the way to the moon, or Mun, excuse me, to the Mun. And so I could do it with our the Minnow's Nerva engines, but I am impatient and I don't want to spend that much time on that big of a maneuver. Mostly for interplanetary transfers and circularization burns and all these other maneuvers, the Nerva engines are great. Now they're very efficient. They get us going. But for this one, it was a lot of delta V, and I actually tried this a couple of different times, and I think because of the Oberth effect, that the efficiency was not actually that bad. And because if the efficiency isn't really that bad, and it saved me 10 minutes and a bunch of work to try to get this thing going, I think that that's a worthy trade. So yeah, like I said, you can see I flipped the thing around. Sorry I didn't catch the video of it. And the maneuver planner. I've gone to the moon plenty of times, and it's really it's always kind of a crapshoot what the most efficient way is. And this new maneuver planner from MechJeb is really nice. You see, there's this Hohmann transfer that you can set up. You say, hey, you target the Mun. You say, hey, I'd like to set up a transfer, and it sets up the maneuver node for you, which is great because really you could if you're new to Kerbal Space Program, you can use MechJeb, you can have it set up the maneuver nodes, and then you can fly them all yourself. Really excellent tool because it's a great teaching tool, I think. I ended up having MechJeb go ahead and run this maneuver for me because I'm fine with letting it do that for me. And you go and warp all the way around, and as soon as you hit go, I mean, it does all the warping, it points you at your maneuver node, and fires at the engines. So yeah, we have quite a bit of thrust in the coconut. But even with all that thrust, our thrust to weight ratio is still actually way less than even 1. I think it's like 0.46. Which is fine for in space because you're not having to push through atmosphere, you're not having to do anything that's super difficult. It's all, if you have enough time and you have an engine that has enough thrust, you can do just about anything. So we burn through probably like 15,000 liters of fuel for this maneuver. It was I think it was more like 12 using the Nervas because we had to burn so far off from. It was a really long burn with the Nervas. It was almost 7 minutes, and I'd have to have someone will check me on this, I'm sure, but I really do think that with the being able to have a shorter burn right near the periaps, I think was probably better because even when I was using the Nervas, you can watch your speed actually decrease. You are thrusting forward at full power, and your speed actually is decreasing because your thrust to weight is so low, and you're gaining altitude relative to your target. So I go ahead and transfer over to the SOI of the Mun, and I find out that MechJeb it definitely gave me an intercept. It was going to put me right through the core of the mun. So now we're going to have to fix that. I'm going to have to go ahead and set up another maneuver node to raise my periaps. And I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but I ended up having another maneuver node somewhere. I think I have 2 maneuver nodes. I don't know. And yeah, so the goal with this whole trip is I have I have a lander, the coconut, and the rover. I want to go ahead and do a bunch of Easter egg hunts and stuff like that. The mun has quite a few Easter eggs, and so I've actually never gone to find them. So now that we have a really fun rover and we have, all this other, the other tools to let us keep going on multi-planet missions, I'm excited to check out all these Easter eggs. I'll make sure to put those in their own video with spoiler tag for people who want to go and explore for themselves. Yeah. Oh, and also when you're using the Kethane pack, or ISA Mapset, two different plugins I have, it's really nice if you are, instead of being in a equatorial or low inclination orbit, you really want to have as high of an inclination as possible. And because I am an idiot and I ended up putting myself in a retrograde orbit around the mun, I decided just to go with a 90-degree inclination. So I basically orbit from pole to pole. That will make later on, when I want to either eject from the mun or if I want to, burn out from the mun. In any case, it should make it easier to get to rather than having to fight the curvature or the rotation of the mun for my landers. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the periaps and set up and circularize. Circularization, because the mun has no atmosphere, you have to do a powered circularization. You have to say, okay, I want to orbit around this body, otherwise you just slingshot past it. So go ahead and run that maneuver. And like I said, anything less than about 250 or 300 delta V doesn't take very much time with the Minnow's main engines. And something to keep in mind as well is these are the Kerbal Space Program Expansion Pack Nerva engines, and they're actually twice as big. So it's the equivalent in the base game. You don't really have anything that's nearly as powerful with this kind of specific impulse. The standard, I think, LVN engine is about half. So anyway, there we go. We have transferred to the mun, and we're ready to mine up that sweet, sweet Kethane. And so, anybody, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.